As is the case with most of my videos, this is a video for a specific friend from a conversation we had and some ideas that I've had since our conversation. So essentially this is a video following up on my video Understanding the Corruption of the Bible as described in the Book of Mormon. And essentially words, they mean things. Let's pay attention. And the word covenant is really important. So let's explore these ideas. The discussion that I was having with my friend, he was pointing out that the original wording of the Book of Mormon was a little different. In 1 Nephi 13, he was pointing out that the word was woundedness. So it says that, neither will the Lord God suffer that the Gentiles shall remain forever remain in the awful state of woundedness, which thou beholdest. But they changed woundedness to blindness. So there's also a note that woundedness, possible reading, was wickedness, and that's a textual analysis. So let's just explore those ideas: woundedness, blindness, wickedness. So starting with blindness, that's the word that they chose. I think it ties to the idea of the blinding due to the removing of the doctrines and covenants that was discussed earlier in the chapter. It used the word blinding. It signifies an inability to see clearly or at all. So that's kind of the ideas being conveyed by using the word blindness, which is the word they chose. Now, woundedness was the first word that was written, and the most likely one is signifying an injury afflicted upon by another individual. That's going with the definitions of wounding. That was the definition that I felt was most significant. And does that fit? Absolutely. Was it an injury inflicted upon us? Yes. Okay, so what about wickedness? Possible textual variation. I found this interesting as well. Evil in intent, deviating from God's laws or God's law. So does that fit? Yes. I feel like all three of these words that were possibilities in this place fit for what was being described. So, are we blind? Yes. Were we wounded? Yes. Is it wickedness? Yes. So, all those I feel like just add to the meaning of that verse. And considering what possible use of the word would have been intended in verse 32 in considering between blindness, woundedness, or wickedness, it led me to earlier in the chapter, which is why I believe they chose blindness, which is in verse 27, that it said that the removing of the plain and precious truths, that it might blind the eyes and harden the hearts. So I felt like blindness was a fitting use. But in rereading that, the plain and precious and most precious, and also many covenants of the Lord have they taken away. The word covenant struck me a little different, and I decided to dig a little deeper. Anytime I dig a little deeper, I prefer to go to the Noah Webster 1828 dictionary, because this is the meanings and uses of the words at the time that Joseph Smith was translating the Book of Mormon. So the word covenant is a mutual consent or agreement between two or more persons to do or to forbear some act or thing. The concept to do something just really struck me with my paradigm on the plain and precious truths being removed. One of the most plain is the removing of the feasts in the Old Testament. Easiest to look at is the replacement of Easter with Passover. I talked about that in the other video. Like I say, this is a follow-up. So the idea that this is a covenant, so to do something, this is what the Lord was asking them to do in instituting Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So this leads to Exodus chapter 12, verse 14, speaking about this feast of Passover and unleavened bread. You shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. Later in the chapter, re-emphasizing verse 17, shall keep the feast, observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in this selfsame day I have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore ye shall observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. And so, once again, later, ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance to thee and to thy sons forever. This was not intended to go away, be replaced by Easter. We are not observing this day or this feast. We're not observing those concepts, and this is clearly the to do something part of the covenant removed, so therefore a covenant removed. I think this is very plain and very precious. Verse 14 does have a footnote that is worthy of noting. It is on the word forever, and if you go to that, it takes you to 3 Nephi chapter 9 and verses 19 and 20. So this is Christ speaking, and he says that you shall offer up unto me no more the shedding of blood. Yea, your sacrifices, your burnt offerings shall be done away. I will accept none of your sacrifices and your burnt offerings. And then he gives the replacement. So he takes something away and he gives something to replace it. You shall offer for me a sacrifice, a broken heart, and a contrite spirit. So this is a one-for-one. He's taking one thing away that we're supposed to do daily, and he's giving something else that we're supposed to do daily. I would argue that this is the daily burnt offerings and sacrifices that were performed in the temple. But people do look at this, understandably, that this is talking about all of the sacrifices. I would disagree to the sense that Passover is a traditional sacrifice. The word sacrifice, the translation of the word, is essentially just like an elevation spiritually. And so is he saying that anything you're elevating spiritually he will not accept? No, that's not what he's saying. He's giving a specific thing that he's pointing to. But on the idea that Passover, that sacrifice, that elevation of that meal, which is a feast, is part of the sacrifices that he's asking to be done away with, doesn't strike me as true, but let's just say it is. But what about the unleavened bread? So that's not blood. That's nothing to do with what he's describing, but we don't even talk about unleavened bread. We sometimes talk about Passover, but we never talk about unleavened bread. So I would say that this doesn't fit the bill, that it's done away. I would suggest that the feast, the meal of Passover, has not been done away. I would say that the process of unleavened bread, the lessons tied to unleavened bread, have not been done away. Once again, these are plain and precious truths that were intended to be done forever, and they're the plain and precious truths removed. So thanks for listening, and hope this was helpful.